If you've ever been to the Museum of Anthropology at the University of British Columbia, you may have passed by a large wooden sculpture that looks similar to this. This sculpture is called The Raven and the First Men, and this is a piece of Haida art which reflects a cultural story regarding the origin of mankind. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The Raven and the First Men was created in 1978 by sculptress Bill Reed, who was a renowned Haida artist who made many sculptures out of gold, wood, and more. Reed was born in 1920 on the island of Victoria in British Columbia, with a Haida mother and a Scottish-German father. In his 20s, Reed spent time with his grandfather, also a carver, who inspired Reed to become one himself. He went to study goldsmithing in Toronto before coming back to Vancouver. Reed created many sculptures throughout his life, even after getting afflicted with Parkinson's disease. Bill Reed passed away in 1998. Initially, The Raven and the First Men started off as a small wooden carving, but Reed was commissioned to create a larger sculpture of the same image. Since the sculpture was going to be so large, the block of wood used was created by 106 fine-grained yellow cedar beams, which were stacked together. The massive block weighed around 4.5 tons and was extremely massive, measuring 8 by 8 by 7 feet. The sculpture was carved in a shed on the campus of the university until its final stage, where it was moved to the Museum of Anthropology, where it sits to this very day. The entire process took around 7 years, and the final product was over 6 feet high. The story of this sculpture represents a Haida legend that depicts the origins of the Haida people. The legend revolves around the discovery of the Haida people from the Raven. The legend goes as follows. After a large flood recedes, Raven has eaten all the food stranded on the beaches and isn't hungry anymore. Instead, curiosity and his natural trickster habits let him walk up and down the beach, seeking something to mess with. With nothing alive at shore, Raven cried out to the sky, desperate for any sign of life. Suddenly, Raven heard a muffled noise and immediately got interested. He followed the sound until he was met up with something large and white, partly buried in the sand. It was a giant clamshell. The inside of the shell, the most miraculous, was filled with many, many tiny creatures, hiding from the shadow Raven cast upon them. Immediately, Raven decided to try and wriggle these creatures out, but the creatures were shy and too afraid to do so. So, Raven, with his sly tongue, tried to coax the creatures out into his wonderful world. At first, many were hesitant, but then slowly, one by one, the creatures left the shell and entered the world. The creatures seemed similar to Raven, but different. They both had 2 legs, but had no wings, no beak, and no feathers. These were the first humans, the Haida. In the end, Raven was never bored again, watching these creatures create families and live happy lives. The Raven and the First Men sculpture clearly shows the story, with the larval raven standing up top the giant clamshell, and the first humans inside the shell. This has made the sculpture a cultural influence on the Haida people. Not only has the sculpture been celebrated by the Haida, but it has also, in September 2004, been added to the Banks Canadian Journey series, which is a series to celebrate Canada's history, culture, and achievements. In the end, the sculpture has been a great influence on society, touching the emotions of people in many different cultures. These pieces of art greatly contribute to the reconciliation of indigenous communities, allowing people to understand more of the Haida culture while adoring the large, beautiful piece of artwork.